In the shadowed halls of Ashford Hall, a scream pierces the night, and Victor Langley, the charismatic gentleman in the velvet coat, lies dead, poisoned brandy in his glass, a letter opener in his heart, and a single white rose petal at his feet. Hercule Poirot, with his brilliant mind, unravels a web of deceit, a forged painting, a cryptic code, and secrets of love and betrayal. As motives of greed, pride, and vengeance collide among the elegant guests, Poirot reveals not one, but two culprits in a shocking double crime. Will the truth bloom like the rose, or remain buried in the shadows? Join the master detective in a tale of murder and mystery. Chapter 1. The Curious Invitation. The November morning draped London in a soft grey mist, the kind that clung to the cobblestones and muffled the clatter of hansoms. In his impeccably ordered flat at Whitehaven Mansions, Hercule Poirot sat at his breakfast table, a delicate porcelain cup of tisane steaming before him. The sunlight, filtered through heavy drapes, caught the gleam of his patent leather shoes and the wax tips of his moustache, which he adjusted with a fastidious flick. His valet, George, had laid out the morning's post with precision, and among the usual bills and invitations rested a single envelope of thick, cream-coloured paper, its elegant script addressed to Monsieur Hercule Poirot. Poirot sliced it open with a silver letter opener, his small, neat hands moving with the grace of a watchmaker. The letter was from Lady Beatrice Ashford, a name that carried the weight of old money and older secrets. She invited him to a weekend gathering at Ashford Hall, her estate nestled in the rolling hills of Kent. The tone was courteous, almost deferential, yet it hinted at something more, a matter of delicate concern that required his unique talents. No further details were offered, and Poirot's dark, almond-shaped eyes narrowed. "Most curious," he murmured, tapping the letter against his chin. Why does a lady of such refinement summon Poirot with such vagueness? There is a mystery here, I think. He telephoned Captain Arthur Hastings, his steadfast friend, whose enthusiasm for adventure often outpaced his deductive acumen. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice crisp with anticipation. "Pack your bag. We are summoned to Kent, to Ashford Hall. There is a puzzle afoot, and Poirot does not resist such a challenge." The train to Kent sliced through the countryside, its rhythm a soothing counterpoint to the fog-shrouded fields beyond. Hastings, seated opposite Poirot in their first-class compartment, fidgeted with his newspaper. "I say, Poirot," he ventured, his honest face creased with curiosity, "what do you make of this invitation? Lady Ashford's not the sort to cry wolf, is she?" Poirot, gazing out at the patchwork of hedgerows, smiled faintly. "Non, Hastings. Lady Beatrice is a woman of taste and discretion. If she calls for Poirot, it is because the ordinary methods have failed her. There is something, how do you say, amiss." Ashford Hall loomed into view as their car wound through lanes bordered by ancient oaks. The estate was a sprawl of Jacobean grandeur, its gables piercing the mist like the prows of ships. Lady Beatrice greeted them at the entrance, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp as cut glass. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a gloved hand, "your presence honours us." Her voice was velvet, but Poirot detected a tremor beneath it, a note of strain that belied her composure. The other guests were already assembled in the drawing-room, a cavernous space adorned with tapestries and lit by a chandelier that glittered like a constellation. Sir Reginald Thorne, a retired diplomat with a mane of white hair and a monocle, clutched a glass of sherry and spoke of rare manuscripts with a collector's zeal. Miss Clara Vane, a rising actress with porcelain skin and auburn curls, laughed too brightly, her eyes darting as if seeking an audience. Mr. Leonard Grayson, a financier with a sallow complexion and a habit of tugging at his cuffs, seemed ill at ease among the opulence. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, A physician with a cool, appraising gaze stood apart, her conversation limited to clipped observations on the weather. Then there was Mr. Victor Langley, introduced with a flourish by Lady Beatrice as the gentleman in the velvet coat. He swept into the room, his emerald green coat a vivid slash against the muted tones of the hall. His smile was dazzling, his voice a rich baritone that commanded attention as he spoke of art and travel. Yet Poirot, ever observant, noted the way Langley's fingers tightened around his glass when Lady Beatrice mentioned a recent acquisition, a Renaissance portrait of a woman in mourning. Sir Reginald's monocle dropped, and Miss Vane's laughter faltered. A shadow passed over the room, brief but unmistakable. Dinner was a symphony of crystal and silver, the table groaning under the weight of pheasant, truffles, and a claret of exquisite vintage. Conversation flowed, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, cataloguing the glances, the hesitations, the unspoken tensions. Lady Beatrice spoke of the painting with a forced lightness, calling it a curiosity Mr. Langley assures us is authentic. Langley's smile tightened, and Sir Reginald cleared his throat, muttering about provenance. Dr. Marsh, silent through much of the meal, watched Langley with an intensity Poirot found intriguing. As the guests retired, Poirot lingered in the hall, his small figure dwarfed by the towering portraits. Hastings, stifling a yawn, joined him. "Well, Poirot, what's your verdict? A pleasant bunch, if a bit stiff." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Pleasant, perhaps, but each carries a secret, Hastings. The grey cells. They are already at work. This invitation, it is not for a mere weekend. It is for a drama, and Poirot shall be its audience." Chapter 2. The Midnight Cry. The great clock in the hall of Ashford Hall struck 11, its chimes resonating through the oak-panelled corridors like a solemn requiem. The guests had retired to their rooms, the fire in the drawing-room reduced to glowing embers, and the vast estate settled into an uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of ancient timbers or the distant howl of wind across the Kentish hills. Hercule Poirot, however, was not asleep. In his room, a tastefully appointed chamber with heavy damask curtains and a four-poster bed, he sat in a high-backed chair, his small, neat hands folded over a leather-bound notebook. The flickering light of a single candle illuminated his sharp features, casting shadows that danced across his polished moustache. His mind, ever active, sifted through the evening's observations, the strained politeness of Lady Beatrice, the nervous tick of Mr. Grayson, the enigmatic gaze of Dr. Marsh, and above all, the flamboyant charm of Mr. Victor Langley, the gentleman in the velvet coat. Poirot had noted the undercurrents at dinner, the way conversation skirted around the Renaissance portrait Langley had boasted of acquiring. The painting, he sensed, was more than a mere artwork. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited hidden resentments among the guests. He jotted a note in his precise script. Why does the portrait provoke such unease? Is it its value, its history, or something yet unseen? Closing the notebook, he rose, adjusting his silk dressing-gown, and paced the room, his patent leather slippers silent on the thick carpet. "The little grey cells," he murmured. "They demand clarity, and clarity shall be found." His reverie was shattered by a sound that pierced the stillness, a scream, high and desperate, echoing through the house like a gunshot. Poirot froze, his head tilted, every sense alert. The scream came again, fainter but unmistakable, followed by a thud and the clatter of something falling. Without hesitation, he seized his cane and opened the door, stepping into the dimly lit corridor. Captain Hastings emerged from his room across the hall, his hair dishevelled, his pyjamas slightly askew. "Good Lord, Poirot!" he exclaimed, clutching a candlestick as if it were a weapon. "What was that?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the half-light. "Trouble, mon ami, Quickly, we must find its source. Together they hurried down the corridor, their shadows flickering on the walls like spectres. At the foot of the grand staircase, they found Lady Beatrice, her face ashen, her silk nightgown trembling about her. She stood clutching the banister, her eyes wide with horror. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's Mr. Langley. He's dead." Her words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Poirot's expression remained composed, but his mind raced. "Show me, madame," he said gently, guiding her forward. They ascended to the second floor, where a small crowd had gathered outside a heavy oak door. Miss Clara Vane, her auburn curls loose and her face streaked with tears, clung to Sir Reginald Thorne, who looked pale beneath his white mane, his monocle dangling uselessly. Mr. Grayson hovered at the edge, his hands twisting together, while Dr. Evelyn Marsh stood apart, her expression unreadable, but her hands steady as she adjusted her spectacles. The door to Langley's room stood ajar, revealing a scene of grim disorder. Poirot entered, his small figure commanding despite the chaos. Victor Langley lay sprawled across a mahogany desk, his emerald green velvet coat stained a dark, glistening red. A silver letter opener, its handle ornate with filigree, protruded from his chest, the wound precise and deep. His eyes, once bright with charisma, stared blankly at the ceiling. A glass of brandy had tipped over, its contents pooling on the desk, mingling with the blood. The window, a tall casement overlooking the gardens, was open, its curtains fluttering in the cold night air. On the floor, near the desk, lay a single white rose petal, its edges curling slightly, as if it had been trodden upon. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, let out a low whistle. "Good heavens, Poirot!" Stabbed, and in such a brutal fashion. Poirot did not reply immediately. He knelt, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a jeweller inspecting a gem. The desk held a half-finished letter, its ink still wet, addressed to an unknown recipient. The words were cryptic. "The truth will out, and you shall regret your part in it." Poirot's gaze lingered on the rose petal, then moved to the open window. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious." Lady Beatrice, regaining some composure, spoke from the doorway. "I heard the scream from my room," she said, her voice steadier now. "I thought it was Clara at first, but when I reached the corridor, I saw the door open and found him like this." Miss Vane, still trembling, nodded. "It wasn't me. I was asleep, but the scream woke me. I came running and saw— Oh, it's too horrible." Sir Reginald patted her arm awkwardly, his diplomatic poise strained. "A ghastly business," he muttered. "Who could have done such a thing?" Dr. Marsh stepped forward, her manner brisk. "If I may, Monsieur Poirot, I can confirm he's dead. The wound is fresh, likely within the hour." She knelt beside the body, her fingers probing with clinical detachment. The letter opener pierced the heart. Death would have been almost instantaneous. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving her. "Merci, doctor. And the brandy. Did you notice anything unusual?" Dr. Marsh sniffed the spilled liquid cautiously. "A faint bitterness, perhaps, but I cannot be certain without analysis." Poirot turned to the window, examining the sill. There were no signs of forced entry, no mud or marks to suggest an intruder had climbed in from the gardens below. The latch was intact, the glass unbroken. He closed the window, noting its smooth operation. "The window," he said to Hastings. "It is open, yet the night is cold. Why would Monsieur Langley leave it so?" Hastings frowned. "Perhaps the killer escaped that way." Poirot's smile was faint but dismissive. "Non, mon ami. The window is a stage prop, meant to distract. The truth lies elsewhere." By dawn, Inspector Japp arrived from Scotland Yard, his overcoat damp from the morning mist. His bluff, no-nonsense demeanour filled the room as he surveyed the scene. "Well, Poirot," he said, rubbing his hands, You've landed in it again, haven't you? A straightforward case, I'd say. Stabbed, window open, valuable painting gone, robbery gone wrong, mark my words. He gestured to the wall above the desk, where a faint outline suggested a painting had recently hung. The Renaissance portrait, so central to the dinner conversation, was conspicuously absent. Poirot's moustache twitched. Straightforward, you say, Inspector? Non, non. The painting is but one thread in a tapestry of motives. We must look to the hearts of those present, not merely to the objects absent. Japp grunted, unconvinced, and began barking orders to his men to search the grounds. Poirot, meanwhile, knelt once more by the rose petal, lifting it with a pair of tweezers and holding it to the light. This petal, he said softly, it is not from Ashford Hall. The gardens here are bare of roses in November. It was brought here, deliberately or by chance, and that, Hastings, is a clue of the first importance. He turned to Lady Beatrice, who stood watching from the doorway, her hands clasped tightly. Madame, who discovered the body first? She hesitated, then said, I did, Monsieur Poirot. I opened the door after the scream and saw him. Her voice faltered, but her eyes held his, steady and unyielding. Poirot nodded, filing her reaction away. And you, Mademoiselle Vane, he said, turning to Clara. You heard the scream but did not enter. Clara nodded, her tears dry now. I was too frightened. I waited in the corridor until Lady Beatrice came. Poirot's attention shifted to the desk, where he examined the half-finished letter more closely. The handwriting was Langley's, bold and flourishing, but the ink had smudged, as if the pen had been dropped mid-sentence. He slipped the letter into an envelope for later study, then turned to the spilled brandy. The glass, etched with the Ashford crest, lay on its side, its contents staining the blotter. Poirot sniffed it cautiously, detecting the same faint bitterness Dr. Marsh had noted. A laboratory analysis, I think, is necessary, he said to Japp. There is more here than meets the eye. As Japp's men cordoned off the room, Poirot stepped into the corridor, where the other guests lingered, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and suspicion. Sir Reginald, polishing his monocle nervously, muttered about the dreadful scandal this would cause. Mr. Grayson, his sallow face glistening with sweat, kept glancing at the staircase as if longing to flee. Dr. Marsh, composed but watchful, met Poirot's gaze with a slight nod, as if acknowledging his scrutiny. Miss Vane, now wrapped in a shawl, seemed on the verge of collapse, though her eyes darted to each guest in turn, searching for something, or someone. Poirot drew Hastings aside, his voice low. Observe, mon ami, the behaviour of our companions. Grief, yes, but also guilt, fear, and calculation. Each has a story, and each story holds a piece of the truth. Hastings frowned, his honest face troubled. But Poirot, the painting's gone, and the window was open. Surely that points to an outsider. Poirot shook his head. The painting, the window, these are the flourishes of a clever mind. The killer is among us, Hastings, and the rose petal will lead us to them. He returned to the room, his eyes sweeping over every detail, the overturned chair, the scattered papers, the faint scuff mark on the carpet near the desk. He paused by the fireplace, where a few logs still smouldered. A faint ash mark caught his eye, barely visible against the hearthstone. Kneeling, he examined it closely, then rose with a satisfied nod. A cigarette, perhaps, or something burned in haste, he said to himself. The little details, they speak when all else is silent. As the morning light filtered through the mist, Poirot addressed the gathered guests, his voice calm but authoritative. Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred, but rest assured, Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth. I ask that you remain at Ashford Hall and cooperate with Inspector Japp. The answers lie not in flight, but in the secrets we carry. His eyes lingered on each face, noting the flicker of unease in Grayson's glance, the tightening of Lady Beatrice's lips, the defiant tilt of Clara's chin. To Jap, he added, "Send the brandy glass and this letter to your laboratory, Inspector, and search the grounds, but I wager you will find no trace of an intruder. The answer is here, within these walls." Jap nodded, though his skepticism was evident. "You and your grey cells, Poirot," he said with a wry smile. "I'll stick to footprints and fingerprints for now." As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered in the room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The rose petal, the letter, the brandy, the missing painting. Each was a thread in a complex web, and he would unravel it with the patience of a spider. "The midnight cry," he murmured. It was not just a scream of fear, but a signal that the game has begun, and Poirot, he shall play it to the end. Chapter 3. The Guests Under Scrutiny. The morning after Victor Langley's murder dawned cold and grey, the mist clinging to Ashford Hall like a shroud. In the breakfast room, where a sideboard groaned under silver dishes of kedgeree and devilled kidneys, the guests assembled in uneasy silence. The clink of cutlery was subdued, the air heavy with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his moustache gleaming like a polished blade, observed the scene from a corner table, a cup of café au lait cradled in his hands. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, darted from face to face, cataloguing the telltale signs of guilt, fear, and evasion. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, buttered a slice of toast with unnecessary vigour. "I say, Poirot," he whispered, "it's dashed awkward, breakfasting with a murderer in the room. Any idea who did it?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Patience, mon ami. The truth reveals itself not in haste, but in the careful study of character. Observe, and we shall see." Lady Beatrice presided over the table with the grace of a seasoned hostess, though her hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. Sir Reginald Thorne, his monocle firmly in place, leafed through a newspaper, his fingers betraying a nervous quiver. Miss Clara Vane, her beauty muted by red-rimmed eyes, picked at her plate, her gaze flickering toward the door as if expecting Langley's ghost to appear. Mr. Leonard Grayson, his sallow complexion more pronounced in the morning light, muttered about urgent business in London, only to be silenced by a sharp glance from Lady Beatrice. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, composed as ever, ate with mechanical precision, her cool grey eyes meeting Poirot's briefly, before returning to her meal. Poirot rose, his small stature commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice clear and measured, "a crime has been committed, and it is my intention to uncover the culprit. I ask for your cooperation in answering a few questions. The truth, it is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be examined to reveal the pattern." A murmur of unease rippled through the room, but none protested. Poirot's reputation, it seemed, preceded him. He began with Lady Beatrice, inviting her to the library, a vast room lined with leather-bound volumes and dominated by a portrait of a stern Ashford ancestor. She sat, her posture rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. "Madame," Poirot said, seating himself opposite, "you spoke last night of a disagreement with Monsieur Langley over the painting. Tell me, if you please, the nature of this dispute." Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, but she met his gaze. The painting, the so-called Renaissance portrait, was to be the centerpiece of my collection. Victor assured me it was authentic, but I had my doubts. I consulted an expert who suggested it might be a forgery. When I confronted Victor, he laughed it off, but I sensed he was hiding something. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And this disagreement, it was serious." Lady Beatrice hesitated, then said, "Serious enough. The Ashford name is tied to its collection. A forgery would be humiliating." Poirot noted the flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes avoided his. "Merci, madame. One more thing. Did you see anyone near Monsieur Langley's room before the scream?" She shook her head. No, I was in my own room until I heard it. Poirot thanked her and dismissed her, his mind already turning to the next guest. Sir Reginald Thorne entered, his diplomatic poise fraying at the edges. He adjusted his monocle and sat heavily, as if the weight of the morning pressed upon him. Sir Reginald, Poirot began, you too spoke of the painting last night. You seemed displeased. Thorne coughed, a nervous habit. Displeased? Well, yes. I bid against Langley for that blasted portrait at an auction last year. Lost a tidy sum when he outbid me. Then to hear it might be a fake. Dashed infuriating, if you ask me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this loss? It was significant? Thorne shifted uncomfortably. Significant enough to sting, but I'm not a pauper, Monsieur Poirot. I wouldn't kill over it. Poirot smiled thinly. Of course. And last night, you saw nothing unusual. Thorne hesitated, then leaned forward. Well, since you ask, I did see Dr. Marsh lingering near Langley's door earlier in the evening. Looked furtive, if you ask me. Poirot thanked him, noting the eagerness in his voice, as if deflecting suspicion. Miss Clara Vane was next, her auburn curls pinned haphazardly, her eyes still glistening with unshed tears. She sank into the chair, clutching a handkerchief. Mademoiselle, Poirot said gently. You were close to Monsieur Langley, non? Clara's lips trembled. Once, yes. We were involved briefly last summer. He was charming, magnetic, but he broke it off cruelly, said my ambitions were childish fancies. I was hurt, but I didn't kill him. Her voice rose, and Poirot raised a calming hand. I believe you, mademoiselle. But tell me, did you visit his room last night? She shook her head vehemently. No, I swear it. I was in my room, asleep, until the scream. Poirot paused, then asked, and the white rose petal found near his body, does it mean anything to you? Clara frowned, puzzled. A rose petal? No, I don't know anything about that. Her confusion seemed genuine, but Poirot noted the quick glance she cast toward the door. Mr. Leonard Grayson followed, his nervous energy palpable as he paced before sitting, his hands twisted together and sweat beaded on his brow despite the cool room. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you seemed uneasy last night when Monsieur Langley spoke of his business dealings. Why? Grayson's laugh was brittle. Uneasy? Well, who wouldn't be with a murder in the house? Langley and I had a disagreement, yes, over some investments. He owed me money, but we settled it weeks ago. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Settled, you say? Yet you were anxious. And last night, where were you before the scream? Grayson's eyes darted to the window. In my room, reading. I heard nothing until the commotion. Poirot leaned forward. And the rose petal. Does it hold significance? Grayson blinked, startled. Rose petal? No, I've no idea what you mean. Poirot dismissed him, noting the man's palpable relief as he left. Dr. Evelyn Marsh was the last, her demeanour as cool as the marble busts lining the library. She sat with the precision of a surgeon, her hands folded neatly. Doctor, Poirot said, you examined Monsieur Langley's body. You noted a bitterness in the brandy. Tell me, what else did you observe? Dr. Marsh's eyes met his, unflinching. The wound was precise, likely delivered by someone with steady hands. The brandy's odour suggested a possible contaminant, but I'd need tests to confirm. I also noticed Langley was in good health when I examined him 3 days ago for a minor complaint. A headache, nothing more. Poirot tilted his head. And this visit to his room last night, as Sir Reginald mentioned. Dr. Marsh's expression did not change. I went to discuss his headache. He seemed agitated, but I left after a few minutes. I saw no one else. Poirot nodded. And the rose petal? She frowned slightly. I noticed it, but thought it insignificant. A decoration, perhaps. Her tone was dismissive, but Poirot sensed a guardedness beneath it. With the interviews concluded, Poirot stepped into the garden, where the mist had begun to lift, revealing bare rose bushes and frost-kissed lawns. Hastings joined him, bundled in a coat. "Well, Poirot, they all have alibis, but none seem entirely honest. That petal business, what's it mean?" Poirot knelt by a flower bed, examining the barren stems. "The petal, Hastings, is not from these gardens. I confirmed with the head gardener. No roses bloom here in November. It was brought here, perhaps as a symbol, perhaps as a mistake. But it is a clue, and Poirot does not ignore clues." They returned to the house, where Inspector Japp awaited in the hall, his notebook open. "No footprints outside the window, Poirot," he said, "and no sign of the painting. My men are searching the attics and cellars now. What's your take?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "My take, Inspector, is that the painting is a distraction. Like the open window, the petal, the letter, the brandy. These are the keys. I shall need to see Monsieur Langley's room again." In Langley's room, Poirot examined the desk once more. The half-finished letter, now in Japp's custody, had been vague but threatening. He studied the scuff mark on the carpet, the ash on the hearth. Then, in a drawer, he found a small key, its design intricate and unfamiliar. "A safe, perhaps," he murmured, slipping it into his pocket. He turned to the window, noting its height from the ground. Too high for an easy climb without a ladder, and no ladder had been found. As they left the room, Poirot paused by the corridor's end, where a small table held a vase of dried flowers. He plucked a petal from it, comparing it to the white rose petal in his tweezers. "Different," he said softly. "The mystery deepens, Hastings." Back in the library, he sat, his notebook open, sketching a diagram of the guests' relationships to Langley. "Each has a motive," he told Hastings, "but the petal suggests a personal touch, a gesture not of greed, but of sentiment. We must dig deeper." The day wore on, the house a hive of whispered suspicions. Poirot, undeterred, continued his inquiries, his mind weaving the threads of motive, opportunity, and evidence into a pattern only he could see. The rose petal, he knew, was the key to unlocking the killer's heart, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until it was found. Chapter 4. The Hidden Correspondence. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Ashford Hall, casting long shadows across the polished floors, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of deductions, stood in the library, his small hands clasped behind his back. The interviews had revealed much, motives simmering beneath the polished veneer of each guest, but the white rose petal, the cryptic letter, and the missing painting remained elusive pieces in the puzzle of Victor Langley's murder. Poirot's grey cells, as he often called them, were alight with possibilities, each clue a thread in the intricate tapestry he was determined to unravel. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, hovered nearby, his brow furrowed. "I say, Poirot," he said, glancing at the sombre portraits lining the walls. "This place feels like a mausoleum today. Have you made any sense of that rose petal business, or that letter Langley was writing?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his inward amusement. "Patience, mon ami. The petal and the letter, they speak, but we must listen with care. Come, let us return to Monsieur Langley's room. There are secrets yet to be uncovered." They ascended the grand staircase, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish. Inspector Japp had stationed a constable outside Langley's room, a young man with a nervous habit of shifting from foot to foot. Poirot nodded to him and entered, his eyes sweeping the scene with renewed intensity. The room remained as it had been, the desk stained with brandy and blood, the letter opener now removed by Japp's men, the window closed, but still whispering of misdirection. Poirot's gaze fell on the desk, where a small locked drawer had caught his attention during his earlier inspection. "Japp's men overlooked this, I think," Poirot said, producing the intricate key he had found earlier. He inserted it into the lock, and with a soft click, the drawer opened. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, their edges yellowed, but the ink still, vivid. Poirot untied the bundle with care, his fingers delicate as if handling a rare manuscript. The letters, written in a flowing, feminine hand, were addressed to Langley, but bore no signature. Their tone was intimate, then bitter, each one a chapter in a story of devotion turned to betrayal. One passage in particular caught Poirot's eye. "You think me a fool, Victor, but I see through your charm. Your lies will cost you dearly, and I shall ensure you pay." Poirot handed the letters to Hastings, who read them with growing agitation. "Good Lord, Poirot, these sound like threats. Could they be from Miss Vane? She admitted to a romance with Langley, didn't she?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, Hastings, but we must not leap to conclusions. The handwriting, it is elegant, precise, much like Mademoiselle Vane's, but we shall verify. For now, these letters are a window into Langley's heart, and perhaps his killer's." He continued his search, his fingers probing the desk's crevices. Beneath a blotter, he found a scrap of paper, its edges torn, as if hastily ripped from a notebook. On it was scrawled a coded message. 379. The mourner weeps. Poirot held it to the light, his mind racing. "A code, Hastings," he said softly. "Perhaps the key to the painting's hiding place, or something more sinister. The numbers, they suggest a sequence, a safe, a lock, a page in a book. And The Mourner Weeps. It is the title of the missing portrait, non?" Hastings nodded, puzzled. "But what does it mean, Poirot? Is it a clue to the killer?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He slipped the scrap into his pocket and turned to the fireplace, where the faint ash mark he had noticed earlier still lingered. Kneeling, he sifted through the ashes with a pen, uncovering a tiny fragment of burned paper, its edges charred, but a few words legible. "Cannot forgive." He straightened, his expression grave. "Someone sought to destroy evidence, Hastings, but they were not thorough. This, too, is a piece of the puzzle." Leaving the room, Poirot sought out Miss Clara Vane, finding her in the conservatory, where she sat among potted ferns, her face pale but composed. She rose at his approach, her eyes wary. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, "I must ask you about certain letters found in Monsieur Langley's possession. Letters of a personal nature." He produced one, holding it just out of her reach. Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Those aren't mine," she said quickly. "I never wrote to Victor after we parted. He hurt me, yes, but I moved on." Poirot studied her, noting the tremor in her voice. "The handwriting, it resembles yours, mademoiselle. May I see a sample of your writing?" Clara hesitated, then scribbled a note on a pad provided by Hastings. Poirot compared the two, his lips pursing. The similarity was striking, but subtle differences in the flourish of the letters suggested another hand. "Merci, mademoiselle," he said. "You have been most helpful." As Clara left, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. Those letters." Poirot raised a hand. "Perhaps, Hastings, but the truth is not so simple. The letters may be a forgery, or the work of another. We must proceed with care." Poirot next sought Sir Reginald Thorne, who was in the billiard room, idly rolling a cue ball across the green baize. The old diplomat's face was flushed, his monocle glinting as he turned. "Sir Reginald," Poirot said, "you mentioned seeing Dr. Marsh near Langley's room. Can you recall the exact time?" Thorne frowned, his fingers tightening on the cue. "Around 10, I think. She was coming out, looking, well, sneaky, if I'm honest. Didn't say a word to me." Poirot nodded. "And you? Where were you before the scream at midnight?" Thorne straightened, indignant. "In my room, reading. I'm not one for late-night wanderings, Monsieur Poirot." His tone was defensive, and Poirot noted the way his eyes avoided contact. Dr. Marsh was next. found in the morning room, reviewing a medical journal with calm detachment. "Doctor," Poirot said, seating himself opposite. "Sir Reginald places you near Langley's room at 10 o'clock. What was the purpose of your visit?" Dr. Marsh's grey eyes met his, unflinching. "I went to check on him. He'd complained of headaches, as I told you. He was agitated, talking about business troubles, but I left after a few minutes. He was alive and well when I departed." Poirot leaned forward. "And the brandy? Did you notice its odour then?" Dr. Marsh shook her head. "No, I didn't touch his drink. I'm a physician, not a barmaid." Her tone was sharp, and Poirot smiled faintly. "Of course. And the rose petal, any thoughts?" She shrugged. "A sentimental gesture, perhaps. Langley was a romantic in his way." Her coolness intrigued Poirot, but he sensed no lie in her words. Returning to the library, Poirot spread the letters and the coded scrap on a table, his mind working furiously. The code, 379, suggested a combination, but to what? A safe, perhaps, as he had suspected, but none had been found in the room. The phrase "the mourner weeps" echoed the painting's title, hinting at its significance beyond mere art. He summoned Japp, who was overseeing the search of the house. "Inspector," Poirot said, "have your men check Langley's London apartment. This code may point to a safe or hidden compartment. And the brandy glass. Any results?" Japp nodded. "Sent it to the lab this morning. Should have something by tomorrow. As for the apartment, I'll wire my men in London. But Poirot, what's this about a rose petal? You keep harping on it." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "A clue, Inspector, is like a star in the daylight, unseen by most, but vital to navigation. The petal is not of this house, and that tells us much." As Japp departed, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The letters, the code, the petal, they form a pattern, Hastings. Someone wished to obscure the truth, to point us toward robbery or passion. But the murder of Monsieur Langley was planned, precise and personal. We must find the safe, and we must find the source of that petal." Hastings frowned. "But Poirot, if the petal isn't from here, how did it get there?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, mon ami, is the question, and when we answer it, we shall be closer to the killer." The day drew to a close, the house settling into a tense quiet. Poirot retired to his room, his notebook filled with diagrams and notes. The letters suggested a scorned lover, the code a hidden truth, the petal a deliberate mark. As he sipped his tisane, he murmured, "The game, it is complex, but Hercule Poirot shall not be outwitted. The hidden correspondence will speak, and the murderer will be revealed." Chapter 5. The Poisoned Glass. The clocks of Ashford Hall ticked toward evening, their measured beats a counterpoint to the undercurrent of unease that gripped the household. The November dusk settled heavily, cloaking the estate in shadows that seemed to whisper of secrets yet untold. Hercule Poirot, his small figure a beacon of order amidst the disquiet, stood in the drawing-room, his dark eyes scanning the assembled guests. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint tang of wood smoke, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, sifting through the clues that piled like leaves in an autumn storm. The white rose petal, the threatening letters, the cryptic code, and the missing Renaissance portrait, "The Mourner Weeps." Captain Hastings, ever at his side, shifted uncomfortably on a velvet settee. "Poirot," he murmured, "this place is getting to me. Everyone's on edge, and that petal business, well, it's downright eerie." Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing at its edges. "Eerie, mon ami. Non, it is illuminating. The petal, the letters, the code, they are the brushstrokes of a murderer's canvas. We must look closer, and the truth will emerge." Poirot had requested a private meeting with Inspector Japp, who arrived from the local police station, his face creased with the fatigue of a long day. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, settling into a leather armchair. The lab results on the brandy glass came through. You were right. There's poison in it. A rare alkaloid, hard to detect unless you're looking for it. Not enough to kill outright, mind you, but enough to weaken a man, make him sluggish. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the letter opener, Inspector? Was it the fatal blow? Japp nodded. The coroner's sure of it. Stabbed straight through the heart, clean and quick. The poison was likely a precaution, or a separate act altogether. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. A precaution, you say? Or a sign of two, minds at work? The poison, it is subtle, calculated. The letter opener, it is dramatic, impulsive. We have perhaps not one crime but two, converging in a single tragedy. Japp raised an eyebrow. 2 killers. That's a stretch, even for you, Poirot. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Not necessarily 2 killers, Inspector, but 2 motives, 2 methods. We shall see. Turning to the guests, who had gathered at Lady Beatrice's insistence for sherry before dinner, Poirot addressed them with his usual calm authority. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice cutting Melaleuil the murmurs. The death of Monsieur Victor Langley was no simple act of violence. The brandy he drank was poisoned, yet it was the letter opener that ended his life. This suggests a complexity, a plan within a plan. I ask you to consider, what did you know of Monsieur Langley's enemies? His eyes swept the room, noting the tightening of Lady Beatrice's jaw, the flicker of fear in Mr. Grayson's eyes, the sudden stillness of Dr. Marsh. Lady Beatrice spoke first, her voice steady but strained. Victor was divisive. His charm masked a ruthless streak. He made enemies in the art world, I'm sure, but I knew of none here. Her words were measured, but Poirot detected a guardedness, as if she were choosing each one with care. Sir Reginald Thorne, polishing his monocle with a handkerchief, added, Langley was a sharp dealer. I knew men who'd lost fortunes to him, myself included. But murder, that's another matter. His tone was gruff, but his hands betrayed a tremor. Miss Clara Vane, seated near the fire, clutched her sherry glass, her knuckles white. He hurt people, she said softly, not just with money but with words, with promises he never kept. Her eyes met Poirot's briefly, then dropped. Mr. Grayson, his sallow face glistening, muttered, Business disputes, that's all I had with him. Nothing worth killing over. Dr. Marsh, her expression as cool as ever, said nothing, but her gaze followed Poirot's every move, as if weighing his intentions. Poirot stepped toward the centre of the room, his small stature commanding despite the grandeur around him. The poison, he said, is a clue of great significance. It requires knowledge, access, and intent. Dr. Marsh, as a physician, you are familiar with such substances, non? Dr. Marsh's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained even. I am, Monsieur Poirot, but so are many others. Alkaloids are not uncommon in medical texts, and I had no reason to harm Victor. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Of course, Doctor. Yet you visited him that evening, as Sir Reginald noted. Did you observe his brandy then? Dr. Marsh's lips thinned. I did not. He offered me a drink, but I declined. I was there to discuss his health, nothing more. Poirot tilted his head, as if considering her words, then turned to Mr. Grayson. And you, monsieur, with your financial disputes, did you share a drink with Monsieur Langley? Grayson's laugh was nervous, almost a bark. Me? No. I'm not one for brandy. I was in my room, as I told you. Poirot's gaze lingered on him, noting the sweat beading on his brow. The dinner bell rang, breaking the tension, and the guests filed out, their faces a gallery of unease. Poirot lingered, his mind turning to the coded message. 379. The mourner weeps. He had sent Japp's men to Langley's London apartment, suspecting the numbers pointed to a safe, but no word had yet returned. The white rose petal, too, gnawed at him. He had confirmed with the gardener that no such roses existed at Ashford Hall, yet its presence suggested a deliberate act. A symbol, perhaps, or a careless mistake. Seeking further clarity, Poirot returned to Langley's room, now guarded by a second constable. The scene remained untouched, save for the removal of the body and the letter opener. He examined the desk again, his fingers tracing the edges of the blotter. Beneath it, he found a faint indentation, as if something heavy had rested there briefly. A book, perhaps, he murmured, or a box. He opened the drawer where the letters had been found, searching for anything overlooked. Tucked in a corner was a single cufflink, gold with an engraved L. "Langley's," Poirot said to Hastings, who had followed him. "But why only one? Was it dropped in haste, or left as a marker?" Hastings frowned. "You're seeing clues in everything, Poirot. That cufflink could just be his, misplaced." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Nothing is misplaced in a murder, mon ami. Each item has its purpose, even if we do not yet see it." He pocketed the cufflink and turned to the fireplace, where the ash mark still lingered. Using a small brush, he collected a sample, noting its fine texture. "Not cigarette ash," he said. "Something else, paper perhaps, or fabric. We shall have it analysed." As they left the room, Poirot paused by the corridor window, gazing out at the darkened gardens. "The petal, Hastings," he said softly. "It is the key. It is not of this place, yet it was found by the body. Someone brought it here, and that someone holds the secret of Langley's death." Hastings rubbed his chin. "But who, Poirot? Clara admitted to a romance, but she denied the letters. And Dr. Marsh, well, she's too cool by half." Poirot nodded. "Cool, yes, but not unfeeling. The poison suggests a mind of precision, yet the letter opener speaks of passion. We must find the link." Dinner was a subdued affair. The guests' conversation stilted, their eyes darting to Poirot as if he might accuse them at any moment. Lady Beatrice maintained her composure, but her hands betrayed her, clutching her napkin tightly. Sir Reginald spoke of politics, his voice too loud, as if to drown out the silence. Clara picked at her food, her beauty dimmed by strain. Grayson drank heavily, his laughter forced, while Dr. Marsh ate with her usual precision, her eyes rarely leaving Poirot. After dinner, Poirot retired to the library, spreading his notes across a table. The letters, the code, the petal, the cufflink, the ash, each was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. He sketched a timeline of the night, marking the guests' movements as they had claimed. Dr. Marsh at 10, Sir Reginald's sighting, the scream at midnight. No one's alibi was ironclad, yet none seemed wholly false. A knock at the door announced Japp, his face grim. "News from London, Poirot. My men found a safe in Langley's apartment, locked with a combination lock. They're working on it, but it's slow going. No sign of the painting yet." Poirot's eyes lit up. "The code, Inspector, 379. Try it." Japp nodded, scribbling a note. "And the ash you sent, preliminary tests say it's paper, possibly a letter, but too little to read. The brandy's poison is confirmed, though. Definitely deliberate." Poirot clasped his hands. "Excellent, Inspector." The net tightens. "Tomorrow, we shall learn more." As Japp left, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice low. "The poisoned glass, Hastings. It was not meant to kill alone, but to weaken, to ensure the letter opener would succeed. This is a crime of calculation, yet cloaked in drama. The petal, the code, they point to a mind that plays a double game." Hastings sighed. "It's a devil of a case, Poirot. But you'll get to the bottom of it, won't you?" Poirot's smile was resolute. "Always, mon ami. The truth, it cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." Chapter 6. The Painting's Secret. The mist that had cloaked Ashford Hall for days began to lift on the third morning, revealing the stark outlines of the Kentish hills and the skeletal branches of the estate's gardens. Hercule Poirot, standing at his bedroom window, sipped his morning tisane, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon. The murder of Victor Langley had woven a web of intrigue. Poisoned brandy, a letter opener, a missing painting, a cryptic code, and that singular white rose petal, and Poirot's mind was alive with the challenge of untangling it. Each clue, he knew, was a deliberate stroke in a murderer's design, and he was determined to reveal the artist. Captain Hastings joined him, his face still creased from sleep, but his enthusiasm undimmed. "Morning, Poirot," he said, adjusting his tie. "Any fresh theories? That code, 379, the mourner weeps. It's been rattling around in my head all night." Poirot's moustache curved upward. "The code, mon ami, is a beacon in the fog. It points to a secret, and I suspect we shall soon know what it hides. Come, we await news from Inspector Japp." In the breakfast room, the atmosphere was taut as a bowstring. Lady Beatrice presided with her usual elegance, but her eyes were shadowed, as if the weight of hosting a murderer had begun to tell. Sir Reginald Thorne, his monocle glinting, spoke little, his attention fixed on a cup of coffee. Miss Clara Vane, her auburn curls neatly pinned today, managed a fragile smile, but ate sparingly. Mr. Leonard Grayson, his sallow face more haggard than ever, fidgeted with his napkin, while Dr. Evelyn Marsh maintained her cool detachment, her fork moving with surgical precision. Poirot observed them all, his grey cells cataloguing every glance, every gesture. Japp arrived mid-morning, his overcoat damp from the lingering mist. He joined Poirot and Hastings in the library, his notebook bulging with notes. "Good news, Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "My men cracked the safe in Langley's London apartment using that code, 379. But here's the odd bit. No painting. Just a ledger, thick as a brick, detailing art deals going back years." He handed Poirot a sheaf of photocopied pages. "Looks like Langley was neck-deep in forgeries. That Renaissance portrait, The Mourner Weeps. A fake, sold to half a dozen buyers before it reached Lady Beatrice." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he scanned the ledger. Names, dates and sums danced across the pages. A litany of deception. Lady Beatrice's name appeared, alongside a purchase price that made Hastings whistle. Sir Reginald's name was there too, confirming his earlier loss at auction. "So," Poirot murmured, "the painting was a fraud, and Langley a swindler. This gives motive to many, none." Japp nodded. Lady Beatrice lost a fortune, and Sir Reginald's pride took a beating. Either could have wanted him dead. Poirot tapped the ledger. "But the painting, Inspector, where is it? If not in the safe, it remains in play, a piece of the murderer's game." He turned to Hastings. "The ledger explains the anger at dinner, the unease when Langley spoke of his acquisition. But the white rose petal, it does not fit this pattern of greed. It speaks of something personal, intimate." Determined to pursue the petal's origin, Poirot sought out the local florist in the nearby village of Ashford. The shop, a quaint establishment with fogged windows, smelled of damp earth and fading blooms. The florist, a wiry woman with a sharp memory, confirmed Poirot's suspicion. A single white rose had been purchased 3 days before the murder by a woman she could not identify. She wore a scarf, kept her face half hidden, the florist said, paid in cash, and left quickly. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. A woman, a rose, a murder. The threads were converging. Back at the hall, Poirot confronted Miss Clara Vane in the conservatory, where she sat sketching a fern with nervous strokes. "Mademoiselle," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "a white rose was purchased in the village days before Monsieur Langley's death. You admitted to a romance with him. Did you perhaps leave a rose as a gesture?" Clara's pencil snapped, her eyes wide. "A rose? Yes, I bought one, hoping to make peace with Victor. I left it in his room that afternoon, but he laughed at me. called it sentimental nonsense. Her voice broke, but her gaze held steady. I didn't kill him, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it. Poirot studied her, noting the sincerity in her eyes, but also the fear. Merci, mademoiselle. Your honesty is noted. He next sought Lady Beatrice, finding her in the morning room, arranging flowers with a precision that belied her inner turmoil. Madame, Poirot said, the ledger reveals that Monsieur Langley deceived you with a forged painting. This was a blow to your family's honour, non? Lady Beatrice's hands stilled, her lips tightening. It was humiliating, she admitted. The Ashford collection is my legacy. To think I was fooled. But I did not kill him, Monsieur Poirot. Her eyes were fierce, but Poirot detected a flicker of something deeper. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. Sir Reginald, when questioned in the billiard room, was less composed. That ledger proves Langley was a scoundrel, he blustered, his monocle dropping in agitation. I lost £10,000 to him. But murder? Preposterous. Poirot tilted his head. Yet you were near his room that night, Sir Reginald. Did you see the rose? Thorne blinked, startled. Rose? No, I saw nothing of the sort. Only Dr. Marsh skulking about. Poirot nodded, filing the deflection away. Dr. Marsh, when approached in the garden, was as unruffled as ever. The ledger changes nothing, she said, pruning a shrub with steady hands. Langley's dealings were no concern of mine. I treated his headache, that's all. Poirot pressed her. And the poison in the brandy, doctor? Your expertise in toxicology, surely you recognize the alkaloid? Dr. Marsh's eyes narrowed. I do, but I didn't administer it. Anyone with access to a pharmacy could obtain such a substance. Her tone was dismissive, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of her grip on the shears. As evening fell, Japp received a telegram. The painting had been found, hidden in a false panel in Langley's apartment, confirming its status as a forgery. Poirot, examining a photograph of the artwork, a mournful woman in black, her eyes glistening with tears, felt a pang of recognition. The mourner weeps, he murmured. It is not just a title, but a message. The killer perhaps mourns their own betrayal. In the library, Poirot spread his notes, the ledger, and the photograph before him. The rose petal, Clara's admission, the forged painting, the poison, all pointed to a crime rooted in both greed and emotion. The petal was no accident, he told Hastings, who sat nursing a whiskey. Clara left it, yes, but the killer used it, perhaps to cast suspicion on her. The poison and the letter opener. 2 methods, 2 motives. We are close, mon ami. Hastings frowned. Close, Poirot? It feels like a tangle to me. Grayson's jumpy, Lady Beatrice, is hiding something, and Dr. Marsh is too calm by half. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Precisely, Hastings. The tangle is the murderer's design, but Poirot sees through it. Tomorrow we shall tighten the net. As the house settled into an uneasy night, Poirot sat by his window, the ledger open before him. The painting's secret was clear. Langley's fraud had ensnared many, but the petal and the poison suggested a deeper wound. The truth, he murmured. It is like the rose, beautiful, but with thorns, and Hercule Poirot shall pluck it. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The 4th day at Ashford Hall dawned with a brittle clarity, the mist finally yielding to a pale sun that cast long skeletal shadows across the frost-dusted lawns. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, his small, meticulous figure framed by towering bookshelves, his dark eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man on the cusp of triumph. The murder of Victor Langley had woven a complex tapestry of clues: poisoned brandy, a letter opener, a forged painting, a cryptic code, threatening letters, a single white rose petal, a burned fragment, and a lone cufflink, and Poirot's grey cells had worked tirelessly to unravel it. Now the threads were aligning, the pattern emerging from the chaos. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood by the fire, rubbing his hands against the morning chill. "I say, Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with impatience. "You've got that look in your eye. Have you cracked it? Who killed Langley?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. "Patience, mon ami. The truth is like a fine wine. It must be savoured at the right moment. Tonight, we shall gather the guests, and the murderer will be revealed." Throughout the day, the house buzzed with a nervous energy. Inspector Japp, fortified by a hearty breakfast, had returned with fresh reports from his men. The ash from the fireplace, analysed in London, was confirmed as paper, likely a letter, though its contents remained lost to the flames. The cufflink, engraved with an L, matched a pair found in Langley's apartment, suggesting it had been dropped during the murder. The painting, "The Mourner Weeps," now in police custody, was a masterful forgery, its value nil, but its role in Langley's schemes immense. Poirot absorbed each detail, his mind weaving them into a coherent whole. He revisited Langley's room, now stripped of its grim tableau, but still heavy with the echo of violence. Standing by the desk, he traced the indentation where something heavy had rested. A box, perhaps, or a hidden compartment. The coded note, 379, "The Mourner Weeps," had led to the ledger, but Poirot suspected it held another meaning, one tied to the killer's intent. The white rose petal, Clara Vane's reluctant confession of its origin, was no mere sentiment. It was a misdirection used by the murderer to cloud the truth. Poirot sought out the gardener once more, confirming that no roses bloomed at Ashford Hall in November. The petal, then, was a deliberate plant, its significance magnified by Clara's admission. "Someone knew of her gesture," Poirot murmured to Hastings, "and turned it to their advantage. The killer is cunning, but not infallible." As evening approached, Poirot requested Lady Beatrice to assemble the guests in the grand library, where the fire roared and the chandeliers cast a golden glow. The room, with its rows of leather-bound volumes and stern portraits, seemed a fitting stage for the denouement. Lady Beatrice, her silver hair gleaming, took her place by the hearth, her face a mask of strained composure. Sir Reginald Thorne, his monocle polished to a sheen, stood stiffly, his hands clasped behind him. Miss Clara Vane, her beauty fragile under the weight of suspicion, sat with her hands folded, her eyes darting to Poirot. Mr. Leonard Grayson, his sallow face slick with perspiration, fidgeted in a corner, while Dr. Evelyn Marsh, her grey eyes cool and appraising, leaned against a bookcase, her posture relaxed but alert. Poirot stepped forward, his small figure commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "The murder of Monsieur Victor Langley was a crime of calculation, cloaked in the trappings of passion. The poisoned brandy, the letter opener, the missing painting, the white rose petal, all were designed to mislead, to point to robbery or romance. But Hercule Poirot sees through the fog, and the truth, it is now clear." He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us begin with the poison. The alkaloid in the brandy was subtle, meant to weaken, not to kill. It required knowledge and access, suggesting a mind of precision. Dr. Marsh, your expertise in toxicology made you a suspect, no?" Dr. Marsh's lips thinned, but she said nothing, her eyes steady. Poirot continued. "Yet the letter opener, driven into Monsieur Langley's heart, was an act of violence, of sudden rage. Two methods, two motives, converging in a single death." He turned to the guests, his gaze sweeping over them. "The ledger, found in Monsieur Langley's safe, revealed his fraud. Lady Beatrice, you lost a fortune to his forged painting, a blow to your family's honour. Sir Reginald, you were humiliated by a lost auction, your pride wounded. Mademoiselle Vane, your heart was broken by his cruelty. Monsieur Grayson, Your financial ruin was tied to his schemes. Each of you had reason to hate him. Clara Vane's voice broke the silence, trembling but defiant. I didn't kill him. I loved him once, yes, but I left the rose to make peace, not to harm him. Poirot nodded. I believe you, mademoiselle. The petal was your gesture, but another used it to cast suspicion on you. He turned to Grayson, whose hands twisted nervously. Monsieur Grayson, your agitation betrays you. The poison, it was your doing, was it not? You, ruined by Langley's fraud, sought to weaken him, to reclaim your losses. Grayson's face crumpled, his voice a hoarse whisper. I only meant to make him ill, to scare him into paying me back. I slipped the alkaloid into his brandy that evening, but I swear I didn't stab him. Gasps rippled through the room, and Poirot raised a hand for silence. I believe you, monsieur. Your crime was cowardice, not murder. The fatal blow was struck by another. He turned to Lady Beatrice, whose composure faltered, her hands clenching the arms of her chair. Madame, Poirot said, his voice soft but relentless, you discovered Langley's forgery not just as a financial loss, but as a personal affront. The Ashford name, your legacy, was tarnished. You confronted him that night, did you not? In a moment of rage, you seized the letter opener and struck. Lady Beatrice's face drained of colour, her eyes wide with horror. No, she cried, rising. How dare you accuse me? Poirot's gaze was unyielding. The evidence, madame, it does not lie. Your handkerchief, stained with brandy, was found near the desk, dropped in your haste. The burned fragment in the fireplace, it was a letter you wrote to Langley, threatening retribution for his deceit. The rose petal, left by Mademoiselle Vane, was a convenient distraction, but it was your hand that wielded the letter opener. Lady Beatrice sank back, her voice breaking. I couldn't bear the shame. He mocked me, laughed at my family's ruin. I didn't mean to kill him, but he pushed me too far. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Sir Reginald's monocle fell, clattering to the floor. Clara's hands covered her mouth, her eyes glistening. Dr. Marsh's expression remained impassive, though her fingers tightened briefly. Grayson, trembling, stared at the floor, his confession hanging heavy. Japp stepped forward, his face grim but satisfied. Well, Poirot, you've done it again. Lady Beatrice, Mr. Grayson, you'll come with me. As Japp led them away, Poirot turned to Hastings, who stood gaping. Good Lord, Poirot, he said. 2 culprits. How did you know? Poirot's smile was serene. The little grey cells, mon ami. The poison was Grayson's fear, the letter opener Lady Beatrice's fury. The petal, the code, the cufflink, they were distractions, but the handkerchief and the ash, they spoke the truth. Each clue, it led to the heart of the matter. The guests dispersed, their faces etched with shock and relief. Poirot remained in the library, his notebook closed, his mind at peace. The painting, the ledger, the petal, all had played their part, but it was the human heart, with its greed and pride, that had written the tragedy. Another puzzle solved, he murmured, and order is restored, for now. Chapter 8. The Departure. The final morning at Ashford Hall broke with a tentative sun, its rays piercing the lingering mist to bathe the estate in a soft, golden light. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and fading autumn leaves, as if the world itself sought to cleanse the stain of Victor Langley's murder. Hercule Poirot stood in the hall, his valise packed with the precision of a military campaign, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache immaculate. The case was solved. The culprits, Lady Beatrice Ashford and Mr. Leonard Grayson, were in custody, and yet Poirot's mind lingered on the intricacies of the crime, as a maestro might savour the echoes of a symphony. Captain Hastings, bundled in his overcoat, joined him, his face a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Well, Poirot, he said, hefting his own bag, You've done it again. 2 murderers in one go. Dashed clever if you ask me. But how did you piece it all together? The petal, the poison, that handkerchief. It's a regular jigsaw. Poirot's eyes twinkled, his small hand adjusting his hat with a flourish. Mon ami, the jigsaw, as you call it, is merely a matter of order. The clues, they are like stars in the night sky. Scattered, yes, but with method, they form a constellation. Come, we shall discuss as we depart. The remaining guests, Sir Reginald Thorne, Miss Clara Vane, and Dr. Evelyn Marsh, gathered in the entrance hall to bid them farewell. Sir Reginald, his monocle firmly in place, shook Poirot's hand with a gruff nod. A bad business, Monsieur Poirot, but you've set it right. Ashford Hall won't soon forget you. Clara, her auburn curls catching the light, managed a tremulous smile. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I thought they'd blame me. Her voice faltered, and Poirot bowed slightly. Mademoiselle, the truth protects the innocent. Dr. Marsh, her cool demeanour intact, offered a curt nod. Your methods are unconventional, but effective. Safe travels. Poirot's gaze lingered on her, noting the faintest shadow of relief in her eyes. Inspector Japp, overseeing the final police arrangements, clapped Poirot on the shoulder. You've outdone yourself, Poirot. Lady Beatrice's confession tied it up neatly, and Grayson's blubbering about the poison sealed his fate. That handkerchief, how'd you spot it? Poirot's smile was serene. The handkerchief, Inspector, was a careless error, stained with brandy, tucked behind the desk. It spoke of Lady Beatrice's presence, her moment of rage. The ash in the fireplace, the burned letter, confirmed her intent. Grayson's poison, it was a separate thread, woven by chance into the same crime. As they stepped into the waiting car, the gravel crunching underfoot, Hastings pressed for more. But the rose petal, Poirot. Clara's gesture. How did you know it wasn't the key? Poirot settled into the seat, his cane resting across his knees. The petal, Hastings, was a distraction, used by Lady Beatrice to point suspicion at Mademoiselle Vane. Clara's admission was truthful, but the killer saw its potential. The cufflink, the code, the painting, they were all part of the murderer's misdirection. But the little grey cells, they see the truth beneath. The car wound through the Kentish lanes, the estate fading into the distance like a memory. Poirot gazed out at the rolling fields, his mind retracing the case. The ledger, found in Langley's safe, had exposed his fraud, enraging Lady Beatrice and Grayson. The painting, The Mourner Weeps, a forgery hidden in a false panel, was the spark that ignited their motives. Her pride, his desperation, the poisoned brandy, Grayson's timid attempt at revenge, had weakened Langley, leaving him vulnerable to Lady Beatrice's impulsive strike with the letter opener. The white rose petal, Clara's naive gesture, had been a convenient tool to muddy the waters. In London, Poirot and Hastings returned to Whitehaven Mansions, where the familiar order of Poirot's flat awaited. Over a cup of tisane, served by the impeccable Georges, Poirot opened his notebook, its pages filled with neat diagrams and notes. The case of the gentleman in the velvet coat, he said. It was a study in contrasts, calculation and passion, greed and honour. Each clue, Hastings, was a whisper of the human heart. Hastings nodded, sipping his tea. You make it sound almost poetic, Poirot. But what about that painting? Will it go back to Lady Beatrice? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. It is evidence now, a forgery that tells its own tale. The Ashford collection will recover, but the scars of this crime, they linger. He closed the notebook, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Another puzzle solved, and the world, it is a little more orderly. As the fire crackled in the grate, Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed. The gentleman in the velvet coat was gone, his secrets laid bare, and Hercule Poirot, master of mysteries, had restored balance to a world disrupted by deceit. The truth, he murmured. It is always there, waiting for those who seek it with method and precision.